Zuma anytime this week, but a leaked version of it saying that free education is not feasible at all has already sparked fear of more intense fees-must-fall student protests witnessed over the last 2 years. Last week, 8 University of Cape Town students were arrested during the fees-related protest. They were released on bail in the Wynberg Magistrates Court on Friday. Now, at the same time, reports emerged that security was tightened at the University of the Witwatersrand, even though the newly elected Students' Representative Council cancelled their planned so-called campus shutdown. This was done to allow exams to go ahead uninterrupted. And on another student-related mental health has come under the spotlight recently as social media has been inundated with suicide incidents. The stress of coping with study demands and growing pressure to secure funding appears to be too much to bear for many students. And to discuss all these and other higher education challenges, we have invited the Minister of Higher Education, Professor Hlengiwe Mkhize, and you may send us your questions and your comments. Our Twitter handle is @SABC News Online. Make sure you use that Twitter handle to engage with the Minister. All right, Minister, a very good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Good morning to the listeners. Thank you very much for having me.
Indeed. Now, when can we expect the Fees Commission after so much dilly-dallying?
The presidency has issued a statement. Cabinet issued a statement assuring the public that the directives are that all structures which are overseeing the recommendations should finalize their work as soon as possible. So from the statement, I would say any time from this week.
What has taken the president so long, though?
I think if you are familiar with commissions, the commissions, they'll come up with a thesis of 400 to 500 pages. So then you need different people to interrogate, try to understand what they're saying against their terms. But of course, it's not government policy. Whatever is done by an independent structure, what if, for instance, the commission said, no, government should not pay for student at all? I'm making a ridiculous example. No president will then take that raw as it is and issue it. He has to process it through structures, interrogate, see what they take. They will take usually whatever is in line with policies, whatever will be in conflict with major policies of this country. The president cannot issue that.
And I presume that you wouldn't want to commit yourself in engaging us on the authenticity of the leaked report. But then, if the reports are anything to go by about the leaked Fees Commission report, at this point, free tertiary higher education is not feasible. Is it really?
I think the leaked report was leaked by somebody who is dubious. I don't think that person had interest of students at heart. With regard to your question, let's look at what the ruling party has said. He has instructed government to look at what steps needs to be taken to phase in free education. If you look at what government has done under basic education, when we started, we didn't have free education. But as of today, for the poor and working class schools, there's no pressure for anyone to pay fees to be at school. Government has taken an extra mile to include, to add on the feeding schemes at school so that each child is guaranteed a nutritious meal per day. So I think government is hard at work. Education is a priority. The ruling party has committed to the issue of doors of learning shall be open. It's a question of how do you get there, how do you do it. NSFAS is a good testimony that was an attempt to ensure that nobody is not at school because their parents are poor. I remember when I was a deputy minister, the universities used to put a condition. They would say a person must pay the registration first. Then we said no. If it's the poor with a granny, it means we are excluding them.
But then is free higher education feasible?
We should make sure that we achieve that objective.
So it is feasible?
It is definitely feasible. But
Okay.
as to when and how, I don't know.
Okay. Right. Now, there have been a few skirmishes at Wits University and University of Cape Town between students and the police. From your assessment, what seems to be the problem here?
Well, the students are genuine. They have numerous problems. Our institutions, some of them are not really transformed in the sense that they are not user-friendly for students, especially the new entrants who come from traditionally black schools, rural areas, they don't just fit in and integrate immediately. So they tend to resort to other means of engaging in communication.
Okay.
So basically, the issue also of NSFAS not being able to take care of their needs, it's a big issue. We're fully aware some people will qualify for NSFAS and end up dropping out because they cannot get food, accommodation, it's not enough for them. So they have genuine issues. The problem for me personally is that if I'm in a vulnerable position like that, I would really urge students not to throw away those nights of assignments, seminars, whatever they've done. It has been hard work, especially for people who are not well resourced. So to throw a year out of the window is like working against your own interest and yourself. So I've been really encouraging them that we're engaging with the students, the unions, with the vice chancellors, with the presidency, with cabinet. We're engaging each and every decision maker to make sure that we stabilize the education system. It's not in their best interest to start fighting with the police, because also we're saying let's not securitize our institutions of higher learning. They're not supposed to have the kind of protest that call for the involvement of the police. I met with the vice chancellors. They were saying, we agree with you, but the problem, we have to secure property. So how do you secure it? You have to get in. They were showing me the amounts of money they spent on security since the fees have started, the campaign started. So which means basically, as we meet with student leaders, we have to engage.
Sure.
Protest is legitimate in democracy. But as to how you do it and how far you take it, that's a big question that we have to negotiate with them.
But it's a noble cause, don't you think, that they're striking for?
It's a noble cause, but the problem, the question is, how do you do it? Do you destroy property? Do you destroy classes? Do you divert the budgets even more? Because if you divert the budget, you take your own agenda out of the table. The real agenda that students have is that help us, educate us. We're poor, we're from working class families. We cannot achieve this on our own. Also, as a country, it's in our interest that they qualify, they acquire skills because of our GDP and the need for young people who are skilled and competent to drive the economy of this country. So the future is in their hands. So we're all in it. That's why I wouldn't encourage them to throw away hard-earned semester marks by not writing.
Now, you are taking over a minister who's been fiercely criticized and accused of having failed a student at tertiary institutions, as Dr. Flayton Zimande. So what is it that you will bring to the table? What is it that you're going to do, or what strategies do you have in place to quell the situation?
Yeah, well, at the moment we have to engage on the fees must fall public discourse. We have to respond. There's nothing which you can do which people will listen to till such time that you cross that bridge. We've engaged with the presidency, everybody understands that. But I think we have to look at the TVET colleges. If you look at countries all over the world that have managed to fight or to manage to fight this unemployment, the colleges are transformed. They give people critical skills they require, and they work in partnership with the private sector, and people are absorbed within the economy. The post-school education landscape was meant to have the critical mass that enter employment with proper skills. At the moment, we're still talking of graduates that are unemployed, which questions even the appropriateness of what we give them. So really is to focus on transformation of our own institution by ensuring that the curriculum is aligned. Whether a student is in a TVET college must be able to take some points and be recognized by the universities, but the workplace is critical, whereby students are assisted to partner with the relevant sectors so that by the time they qualify, they come out. It's either a person succeeds as an entrepreneur or is included in the economy somehow.
All right. And remember, we asked you earlier to send your tweets, your thoughts, share your views on on this particular incident, I mean, on this particular subject that we're discussing with the Minister, and the Minister is here. She'll be with me for the next 25 minutes or so, and she'll be answering some of your questions. So please keep those tweets coming at SABC News Online. Now, Minister, some students have been actually saying that if a female minister takes over this portfolio, things would be different. Do you think that's a fair observation? Are you the right person for the job?
Yeah, no, I'm careful. Once people say it's a female, a woman, or this, okay. I think, I mean, as a woman, as a mother, you know, for me, this issue is personal. I know the struggles of women. Education is a game changer for each and every family. Sometimes men will be all over, they'll focus on other things, but mothers tend to take education close to their hearts. It's the only thing they can give to their children. So I suppose those emotions, it's not symbolic, they are real. Yeah. And also when there's a conflict with students, sometimes, you know, one of the ministers said to me, talk to them like a mother. Don't fight. You don't fight your children when you are in conflict with them. So one has to really bring all the sensitivities of knowing that sometimes they are reckless, sometimes they are young, but it's in our interest to carry them.
So in a nutshell, should students bank their hopes on Professor Hlengiwe Mkhize that she will be able to solve the impasse?
They should.
Okay.
I can tell you, I've seen around the world, education for each and every family is a game changer. Especially, you know, already I've said that our TVET colleges, they need to be under Operation Pakisa, so that it's like an X-ray where you look at what needs to be fixed quickly, so that we get there. It's not always talking about the policy. They should.
Okay.
Yeah, I really believe in education as a game changer for individual families.
I love that confidence, Minister. I really do love your confidence on that particular subject. Now, please avail yourself to answer some of the viewers' tweets that have been coming through. Let's now take a look at some of those the viewer comments that have been coming through. South African poll says free education is feasible in South Africa. Hlengiwe Mkhize and Puti Manamela should update us on the hashtag Fees Commission. And Fazi Cole Brown says, maybe we're doing it the wrong way. Maybe we, the students, should shut down the mines, the banks, and burn the police stations. Hashtag UCT shutdown. EMK Makola says, and we have plenty tweets, that is people who are tweeting, saying that students don't want to write the hashtag fees must fall. Minister, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, but you see, sometimes in our universities, we've got wrong people who don't fit in. They cannot relate to an academic setting. If, for instance, you want to ban, to shut down, to do this, it's really because maybe you haven't reached a point where you value education as an asset for transforming society. Except if a person is using that symbolically, meaning that we have to do more to agitate and to get the whole country committed to education. But I would say I grew up under apartheid, yes. Even when I was in an assignment outside in universities in America and so on, as a young person, I never believed that we should shut down institutions of higher learning. I believe that something drastic must be done so that those resources are used to benefit the South African child and an African child.
Well, I suppose that going for the shutdown route is a result of them not failing to come up with some sort of agreement with the government. They've been trying all other avenues and they've failed, and hence they decide to go for this route.
You see, you assume when people are in universities, they are researchers, they are scholars, they read, they analyze. Government came with NSFAS. You know, it's like researchers. They will come with a methodology and say this and this. But scholarly mind will improve on what we have done. So I won't say their discussions with government has failed. There have been improvements. They've not been adequate. So the question is, what next? That's exactly what they are studying. They must write exams. They must read. Because the more they read, the more theoretical will they be in their mind and analytical, and understand that you can't make a blanket statement and say everything has failed. If you are scholarly in your mind, you would say, government introduced NSFAS. I mean, the budget of this country, the highest budget goes towards higher education. But NSFAS was not enough. Government must close this gap and this, and must speed up the action. Then I will relate to that. I will say I'm dealing with an analyst. But once a person says everything has failed, there's nothing here, then I get worried.
Well, Minister, I guess what adds more fuel to the fire is the government spending patterns. Take, for instance, SAA. They've been injecting numerous bailouts to these state-owned enterprise, and yet the government claims there's no money.
Yeah, we have to find a balancing act. The question of the economy of this country, that's what makes South Africa to be a country. It's not a political entity. If we neglect the economy of this country, we are calling for a real shutdown. So some of the interventions that have been done within the economic sector, we must take them very seriously. The big question, though, is have we got a critical mass of young people who are able to walk in there and begin to drive this economy? We will fail everywhere. Even in universities, if we don't have scholarly young people, we can shout transformation. We'll get people who don't care, who cannot even relate to what we're saying. If we don't have young people who read and research, they're not going to be researchers tomorrow. So they are holding the country to ransom. Take, for instance, if students don't write tomorrow, what happens to medical students who were supposed to be placed all over? We're sitting on a health crisis. There are many of our hospitals which don't have doctors. So should we go outside and get doctors and say, because there was a shutdown, because people are sick? There are some people who already are supposed to be placed with professional bodies. They will punish them. Alone, you won't get into qualifying either as a chartered accountant or whatever because you have lost time. You go back on your own universities, they start saying, oh, the curriculum has changed, go back to third year. So there are realities.
I do get that, Minister, but are you defending the government's reckless spending at the expense of the tertiary students?
No, I will never defend reckless spending. I was trying to explain that if government is confronted by the needs of an SOC, sometimes they will have to meet it because it's about the economy of the country. Take, for instance, you mentioned the SAA. If you didn't assist them, what about the lenders if they began to attack all our SOCs? What will happen to this country? I was saying we must separate the two and say government is in a position where they must find a balancing act. Look at the economy, but also look at education and training, and especially the skilling of our youth for driving the economy. Because maybe our SOCs are struggling because of the lack of competent and properly skilled people for modern economy. Competition is high, the international community is coming on board. We need more skilled people than we have as of today.
Let's talk about unemployed graduate. What sort of plans does government have in place to cater for those?
Well, the social media is good. Some people have said to me, remember, we had Asgisa and Gypsa. Let's revisit those, because what the then Deputy President Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka used to do, unemployed graduates will be invited to bring their CVs, and she partnered with embassies, and they will be placed all over the world. I remember when I came back, I was in economic development. Most of them, they run their companies, they are leaders in companies. So we have to look carefully at their status and what are their needs, and use the partnerships we have, whether within the EU or the AU, and make sure that they are assisted to sharpen their skills. So that it's not only about employment, but also today we've improved even the budget on innovation. If somebody wants to be in the IT, maybe they need money to our own small Silicon Valleys, like the Americans, where you go and say, I want to develop the apps.
Okay.
Yeah, then they are given money and space to do that. So we have to not just to throw out the numbers, but come up with programs that will assist them to get there. It's not a bad thing to have a degree. Even if you're unemployed, at least government can always use the SITAs and all the entities we have to make sure that you get there.
Remember, you can engage with the Minister right now by sending us your tweets at SABC News Online. at SABC News Online. Please make use of that Twitter account and engage the minister. She's here with us for the next 15 minutes or so, and she'll be answering some of your issues or concerns. Let's now take a look at some of these tweets. TAS says, how? Apparently, the fees must fall cry is about regime change. Shaking my head. Nonsensical. Now we know why there is a delay. Hashtag the president's keepers. And Studuza says, why do shutdowns always happen around exam time? I think it's time we pause and question students' commitments. And Tsepo Godfrey says, as long as students are not given free, decolonized quality education, the fees must fall protests will never end. And Dude Meister says, there's going to be a time where we're going to have to sit and talk about student struggles. Students must unite. South Africa has spoken, Minister. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, you see, the interesting one is the one where you say, as long as students are not given decolonized education, that's where things are going wrong. In our case, where students were of the apartheid era, we read books under the table. The Wretched of the Earth, Frantz Fanon, people who were driving the revolution but defending education. No formal institution will give you. It's up to the scholars to read and know how they want to the curriculum to be transformed. You turn around the seminars you write, instead of writing Freud, on Freud or any of these American theorists, as though you are in a first world country, even then, which is, like maybe Sweden and all those ones where things are, there's equity. You introduce alternative ways of thinking about things. There's ample literature. What I'm trying to say, the tweet is saying students must be given, and I'm saying they are not going to be given. They must decolonize the curriculum through their work, through the thesis they write, the seminars they write, how they prepare the engagement in class. Normally students who read, when you are a lecturer, you say one thing and they already have questions and say, have you read Frantz Fanon? Have you read Black Skin, White Mask? Have you read? They ask you questions. Basically, they transform the curriculum.
One viewer has actually suggested that some of the students don't want to write. Is that a reasonable observation?
Well, I suppose people are worried. When it's time to write exams and you start a struggle which doesn't allow exams to be written. And you know very well that any uprising on campus, some people, they go crazy. They can't even study, they can't read, they get so agitated and nervous because they start thinking about their own poverty. What will I say at home? It's not conducive. It's conducive to hysteria. So that's why I said you can protest, but in a smart way, not against yourselves. If you've worked the whole year, maybe you've got credits more than 60%, you are left with 40-something to go through and begin to do internship and get something and be independent, and maybe take out your family out of a shack to a social housing of some kind. So, but my plea is that we should all, especially leaders, encourage students to write exams. We have a responsibility, the private sector, leaders in government, or the whole cabinet, to move towards ensuring that the poor and the working class are at school, they get the qualifications they require with the assistance of government.
It now brings to the fore the issue of mental health at tertiary institutions. Just how involved are you in order to ensure that mentally ill students do not harm themselves, especially around this time of the year?
Well, what we need to do is to ask universities to inform us about the status of student counseling centers. Half the time, universities, they differ. In some universities, you'll find that they take them very seriously. The dean of students oversee that there's adequate care and there's no stigma, there's a hotline and so on. In some instances, the students end up going to public clinics. Others, they end up dropping out. And it's something which is very, very important, since some of the students, as I've said, they really come from a foreign culture. Remember, in this country, if I'm in the golden cities, the city of Cape Town or East London or Gauteng, it's like another country if you come from the rural areas of the same cities, because of inequalities and the apartheid system, where infrastructure and development focus on one area and neglected others. So we really have to look at those aspects, but also these enrichment programs, which are supposed to uplift the vulnerable students who are really not in par with others. Remember, you come here, you are with students, let's say you are at Wits, who come from the Saints, St. Stadians, and all the Saints, who are bringing a culture of 8 distinctions and 9 distinctions. And maybe you come from a culture where at least if you can manage throughout with 40, 50, it's a different world altogether.
Yeah.
And so there's a need for ongoing support for students so that they are in par.
Yeah, and the issue of sexual harassment is also another troubling matter, Minister. What programs are in place to educate the girls about their basic rights?
Well, we have to insist that universities, they run those programs throughout the year. When I was still there, I mean, it continued even after I've left under Blake Zimande and the Deputy Minister Manana. We used to work with the pharmaceutical companies and have what we called First Things First, using the orientation week throughout all our universities, exposing students on issues of sexuality on campus, and of course HIV and AIDS, and issues of sexual crimes, sexual offenses like rape. And when I was in the telecoms, we used to say universities ought to have even safe routes where they put cameras, and students from the library at 9, they should know you cannot just go, you go under the trees and you are taking a shortcut to your residence. There should be routes that are monitored continuously, and those are the routes that people, they should
So you're
use.
throwing the gauntlet on the universities? There's no buy-in from government at all?
Well, you have to have clear policies and guidelines. What I'm saying is what our university division is looking at. You send instructions, then you get compliance. If you leave it to them, this notion of universities are autonomous, it's dangerous. Because if you get government subsidy, you are autonomous when it comes to the decisions about exams and so on. Nobody can interfere. But
Minister, you keep on saying there has to be government policies when it comes to this. Why aren't there government policies when it comes to sexual harassment at varsities?
There's a clear policy on this, which has been driven by Deputy Minister Manana, but the reinforcement, you have to pick it up all the time, depending on what cases are there. And sometimes on government, there are things we do at a particular time and we stop. And so clearly on issues of sexual offenses on campus, harassment is harassment. Serious offenses like rape. Remember, we have come up with even notions of the rape culture. How can you talk about the culture of rape on campus?
This issue is forever escalating, Minister. On a daily basis, we receive reports of of girls being subjected to sexual harassment. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the government does not have a sense of urgency.
The government has a sense of agency.
Why aren't policies implemented then? Why isn't the government coming up with programs to deal with this issue?
Universities are independent. Even if they are given resources to push a program, it's run. That's why I'm saying it depends on the people who are running those programs. But as government, we really have to push for regular reports on issues like this. Remember, we haven't said anything about alcohol abuse on campus. We haven't said anything about drugs.
Sure.
And those things, those practices, they all work against what an institution of higher learning is supposed to be. And it's conducive to all the social ills we're talking about. And, with the dialogues, the first meeting I had with the vice chancellors, I was 3 days in the job, we discussed all of them. I said, we have to get regular reports. as to what interventions are they doing to make sure that they cut out all these problems.
All right. Now, about the fees impasse, the fees must fall protest, lives have been lost and so much damage has been, we've seen so much damage at the tertiary institutions. So who is to blame for this?
I wouldn't really want to say we must blame anyone, because NSFAS was there, money was improved, but it wasn't enough. So students, I wouldn't blame them. I mean, maybe there wasn't confidence in government or engagement, or you know, when politics go wrong, where you convince yourself, mass hysteria, we're all from there. But we had a reason. You know, there was no connection ideologically between us and government. Today really is to encourage students to really know that whatever issues they raise, they are aligned. There's no one who is opposed to students engaging rigorously in whatever manner, but using democratic principles.
Right.
Violence, you know, even our constitution, if you look at it, is very rich on the culture of human rights and principles of democracy. But violence is something which is used if you are on a destructive mood.
Sure. All right, before we close, before I let the minister go, let's take a look at the last round of tweets from you. Mawetu Marila says, no matter who is behind the fees must fall, the devil or someone else, whoever it is, must know that they have my full support.
That's a bad one. That's a bad one.
That is a bad one. Yeah, yeah, that cannot be condoned. Now, Minister, thank you so much for joining us. But then, before I let you go, let's talk about a rather unrelated matter.
Okay.
Now, the High Court has issued a directive that it was unconstitutional for you to dismiss or fire the DG at the Home Affairs, Mkhize Apleni. That's a slap in the face for you.
No, no, no. He was not fired. There was an inquiry.
Suspension, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, low-level inquiry and suspension. And he chose to go the court route and abandon it. And President Zuma is respondent number one, who is the one who is responsible for delegation of powers. So that's where the matter is.
So Mkhize Apleni isn't delusional after all?
Sorry?
He's not delusional after all, Mkhize Apleni?
No, no, you are talking now about the content, the issues, the affidavit that he put through. Maybe you must try to access it because it's public knowledge. Access his affidavit, access the response affidavit.
No, I'm basing it on the outcome of the court judgment.
No, no, no. The court didn't look at the affidavit. It looked at one aspect, the delegation of powers, which is a presidential thing. And rightfully so, his lawyers put President Zuma as respondent number one.
Professor Hlengiwe Mkhize, Minister of Higher Education, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, that was the Minister of Higher Education, Professor Hlengiwe Mkhize, speaking to us in our Johannesburg studios. All right, let's take a short break now, and we'll be right back with more news shortly after this.